Listen, friend, I know you're tired. Not just tired from work, or tired from the week, that deep down tired. That worn out tired that comes from trying so hard for so long that you don't even remember what it felt like when faith was simple. You've watched somebody else pray and thought, why does it seem like God hears them and not me? Maybe it was someone in your small group. Maybe it was somebody on your screen, and something inside you said, I should pray more like that. So you tried. You copied their words, their tone, their posture, and you waited. But it didn't come. And, truth be told, the more you tried to sound like them, the further away God felt. And the further away He felt, the more you started to wonder if there was something wrong with you. I want to look you in the eye right now and tell you, there is nothing wrong with you, but there is something quietly stealing your peace. And today, we're going to name it. See, what I want to show you today is simple, not revolutionary, not some new technique somebody invented last Tuesday, just a quiet, timeless truth from a letter Paul wrote a long time ago to people who are going through the exact same thing you're going through right now. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand why copying somebody else's prayer life is one of the most exhausting things you can do. We're going to see what Galatians chapter 6 says about comparison and why it's described as a trap. And more than anything else, you're going to walk away with the freedom to come to God exactly as you are, with the voice He gave you, in the simple, honest way He designed you to talk to Him. Take a deep breath, friend. This one's for you. Now, I reckon most folks who are caught in this comparison trap don't even know they're in it. They just think they're being humble, or realistic, or spiritually honest about where they are. But here's what's really happening under the surface. The first thing comparison does is move the goalposts. Instead of measuring your prayer life against God's simple invitation, which has always been, come as you are, child, you start measuring it against another person's performance. And that is a race you will never, ever win. Because you're always looking at their Sunday morning and comparing it to your Monday night. You're seeing the highlight reel and judging yourself against it. The second thing it does is turn prayer into a performance. And once prayer becomes a performance, it stops being a conversation. You start choosing your words carefully, monitoring your emotions, wondering if you're feeling enough. And the whole thing becomes exhausting because you were never meant to perform for God. You were meant to talk to Him. And the third thing, and this one hits the hardest, friend comparison starts to make you believe that God has favorites, that He responds to certain kinds of people who pray certain kinds of ways. And once that thought takes root, the intimacy dies, because you cannot be real with someone you're trying to impress. There's a phrase I want you to sit with for just a moment. Comparison is the slow-motion destruction of everything God planted in you. Notice, it says slow motion. It doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic moment where you can point and say, that's when it started. It just quietly, day by day, replaces your genuine connection with God with an imitation of somebody else's. Until one day you look up and realize the prayer life you have isn't even yours anymore. It's a patchwork of other people's styles that never quite fit, never quite worked, and never quite felt like God was really listening. I'll tell you why it felt that way, friend. It's because He was waiting for the real you to show up, and you kept sending a copy. Now, let's go to Galatians chapter 6, because Paul, who was as plain-spoken as they come, addresses this head-on. Verse 4, each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else. And then verse 5, for each one should carry their own load. Look, that word load in the original Greek is the word Phortion, and it means a personal pack, something custom-fitted, something designed specifically for the shape of one person's calling, one person's voice, one person's way of walking with God. Paul isn't saying don't learn from other people. He's saying something much more personal than that. He's saying God gave you a specific assignment, a specific design, A specific way of connecting with him that belongs only to you. And when you throw that aside to copy someone else's, you're not being humble, friend. You're walking away from the calling he placed on your life. That's not a small thing. Imagine this. You're sitting in a concert hall. A full orchestra is about to play. Every instrument is different. The violin doesn't sound like the cello. The trumpet doesn't sound like the flute. And every single one of those sounds is needed to make the music whole. Now imagine the violinist looks over at the trumpet player and thinks, I should sound more like that. So they spend the whole concert trying to play like a trumpet. And what happens? The violin sounds terrible, and the orchestra is missing its violin. Friend, God designed you to be a specific instrument in his orchestra, with a specific sound, a specific range, a specific voice that he intentionally gave you and that nobody else in all of history has ever had. When you try to pray like somebody else, you're not adding to what God is building. You're silencing the very instrument he was waiting to hear. Your raw, worn out, I don't even know what to say prayer. That prayer reaches heaven with a sound no one else's prayer can replicate, because it's yours. And God has been listening for that exact sound since before you were born. I've been there too, friend. So let me tell you the signs that comparison has been quietly working on your prayer life. First sign, you dread praying out loud in a group, not because you don't believe, but because you're afraid your prayer won't measure up. You sit there rehearsing in your head before it's your turn. Second sign, after you pray, your first thought isn't, I talked to God. It's, how did that sound? Third sign, you pray better alone. Way better. When nobody's watching, you're not performing. You're just talking. And those quiet moments, those are the ones where God feels real. Isn't that something? And the fourth sign, you've started avoiding certain prayer settings altogether, certain small groups, certain worship services, because being around people who seem more spiritual than you makes you feel worse instead of inspired. I reckon if even one of those hit home, you haven't failed at prayer, friend. You've just been measuring it against the wrong thing. See, here's the truth that changes the whole season of life you're in right now. God didn't design one perfect way to pray and then hand out copies. He designed you, uniquely, with your specific personality, your specific history, your specific way of carrying the weight of life. And then he said simply, talk to me from that place. The person who weeps in worship isn't closer to God than the person who sits quietly. The person who prays for an hour isn't heard more than the person who prays for 5 minutes with a worn-out heart and nowhere else to go. God doesn't grade your prayer on eloquence. He doesn't grade it on volume. He doesn't grade it on how emotional you get. Truth be told, the one thing God has always been looking for is just a real person, speaking from a real place to a real God who already knows everything you're going to say anyway. What he wants is you, child. Not the version of you that sounds like them, just you. So, how do you actually let this go? How do you break free from a habit that's been building for years? First thing, you change who you think you're praying for. Every time you catch yourself monitoring how your prayer sounds, stop for just a second and ask yourself, who am I actually talking to right now? If the answer is God, then he already knows your heart. He already loves your voice, and he is not comparing your prayer to anybody else's, not even a little bit. He is just listening to you. Here's a simple thing to try this week. Pray exclusively in private for 7 days. No group prayer, no public prayer. Just you and God in a quiet room. No audience means no performance. And without the performance, you'll start to remember what your actual prayer voice sounds like. It might feel awkward at first. It might sound simple. But I've found, and a whole lot of folks have found the same thing, that simple and real will always reach heaven faster than polished and pretend. Second thing, learn the difference between admiration and comparison, because there is one. Admiration says, wow, look how God is moving in that person's life. That inspires me to go to him in my own way. Comparison says, Look how God is moving in that person's life. Why doesn't he move like that in mine? You see the difference? Same observation. Two completely different destinations. One leads you toward God. The other leads you away from him and toward a measuring stick that was never meant to be yours. Here's a quiet little practice that works. Next time you're in a prayer setting and you feel comparisons starting to rise up, instead of measuring yourself against that person, say this internally: thank you, God, that you hear them. And thank you that you hear me too. That one simple thought shifts the whole thing from competition to community. And community is where God always intended for us to be. Third thing, and this one takes the most time, but it's worth every bit of it. Stop copying and start discovering. Instead of trying to figure out how they connect with God, start exploring how God designed you to connect with him. Some folks connect best through words, long conversations, journaling, saying it all out loud in an empty room. Some folks connect best through silence, just sitting still, listening more than speaking. Some folks connect through being outside, walking and praying, watching what God made. Some folks connect through music, or through writing, or through honest tears in a quiet car at the end of a long day. None of those is more spiritual than the others. They're just different instruments in the same orchestra. Galatians 6 is simply an invitation. Pick up your instrument, the specific, God-designed way you connect with him, and play it. Not somebody else's, yours. Because the sound God has been waiting to hear in your prayer life, it was never theirs. Friend, it's always been yours. When you let go of comparison, and I mean really let it go, something shifts in this season of life that I don't think you're expecting. Prayer stops being something you dread. It becomes something you actually look forward to, because you're not preparing a performance anymore. You're just showing up for a conversation with someone who loves you. The guilt, that constant, worn-out guilt of never praying right, it quiets down, because you finally understand that right was never about style. It was always about sincerity. You stop avoiding the prayer groups, because comparison no longer has a hold on you. You can admire how somebody else connects with God without feeling like it takes anything away from yours. And here's the part I want you to hear most. You start to actually hear from God in return. Because when you stop filling your prayer time with imitation, there's finally space for his voice to come through. The prayer that felt like a monologue starts feeling like a conversation. And the God who felt distant starts feeling like he was right there the whole time, just waiting for the real you to finally show up. Listen, God did not create you to be a copy of anybody else's faith. He created you as an original, with an original voice, an original story, an original way of seeing him and talking to him that has never existed before in all of history, and will never exist again after you're gone. Comparison is the slow-motion destruction of that original. Every day you spend trying to sound like them is a day you're silencing the very voice God has been longing to hear. You don't need their words. You don't need their emotions. You don't need their style, their volume, or their tears. You just need to show up as you and speak. Because the God who made the stars and knows every one of them by name, the God who knit you together before your mother ever held you, that God has been listening for your specific voice, child, since before you took your first breath. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to let it be real. Stop praying like them. He called you to pray like you. If this message found you at the right moment today, and I believe it did, don't just let it pass by. Go to the comments right now and type, God, here I am. Just me. That's it. 4 words. And those 4 words might be the most honest prayer you've prayed in a long time, because they're yours, not borrowed, not copied. Just you, showing up as you are. And if you've got somebody in your life right now, a friend, a spouse, somebody you go to church with who always seems discouraged about their spiritual life, share this with them. It might be exactly what they needed to hear today. I've got more of these simple, quiet, timeless truths coming your way every week on Faith Plainly. Because I believe with everything in me that God's truth was never meant to be complicated, and rest was never meant to be earned. I'll see you next time, friend.